My name is Gabriel Tarle, and I was managing this project for a client. You will be hearing me for the next half an hour or so. I'll start with the first slide. A few words about the company. Okay, as you can see, we're a global company. We have offices spread across the world on 4 different continents. We serve a broad spectrum of industries, including automotive, agriculture, consumer, and chemicals. We have also a consulting side of the business, management consulting. And okay, to proceed with the next slide. Okay, on the table of contents side, we have chosen the lubricants for wind turbines because wind energy has emerged as one of the major alternate energy source to address global warming and resource conservation concerns. With the government support, wind energy installations have grown exponentially in the past decade or more, creating a strong demand for lubricants. Even though it's a small fraction of the total lubricant demand, wind turbines are an important niche due to their rapid growth and high synthetic penetration. Okay, a few words about the content of this presentation. I'll be addressing an introductory slide about the study, the methodology, and the regions we covered, followed by the wind power industry overview, then dive into the lubricant products in wind energy, and lastly, focusing on the market evaluation and conclusions. On the introductory slide, it's a little bit crowded, cramped up, but I think it's necessary for the people who care about the methodology to understand how we did the study. On the right-hand side, we have the brochure. And this study has provides demand estimate, lubricant demands estimate for 2019 as the base year, and the projections up to 2024. Demand estimates were built up based on lubricant consumption norms for turbines of various power ratings. Lubricant demand projections are based on 3 parameters: growth in the installed wind energy capacity, changes in drain intervals, and penetration of direct drive machines. The study is global, has a global coverage, but basically only 5 markets have been evaluated thoroughly into a deeper dive: China, the US, Germany, Spain, and India, and a separate global offshore chapter. And this is because these 5 markets account for 3/4 of the global wind energy installed base. There were telephonic interviews conducted in all major markets in China, the US, Germany, Spain, and India for the onshore segment, and few interviews for the UK and Denmark, which are leading in terms of the offshore segment. Okay, continuing with the wind power industry overview. The year 2015 has marked a peak in terms of new installations, reaching 63.8 gigawatts. And then in 2019 was a secondary peak when the new installations reached 60.4 gigawatts. Both China and the US had a really strong performance. China installed as many machines as possible ahead of the expiry of the feed-in tariffs for onshore farms in 2021. Similarly, in the US, the production tax credit PTC has been phased down since 2016 and is set to expire at the end of 2020. In terms of regional installations, they are largely concentrated in the top 5 markets, as I mentioned before: China, the US, Germany, India, and Spain, together accounting for 3/4 of the global wind energy installations. It is worth noting that China increased its share from 33% of the global capacity in 2015 to 37% in 2019. The onshore capacity represented 95% of the global installed capacity in 2019, and offshore, very small, accounted for about 4.4%, 4.5% of that capacity. Most of the offshore capacity is installed in Europe, primarily in the UK, Germany, and Denmark. And in 2019, China accounted for the highest offshore wind capacity outside of Europe with 6.7 gigawatts, followed by Japan and South Korea at a larger distance. Okay, in the first pie chart, you can see China has a huge percentage of the total installed capacity, followed by the US, Germany, India, and Spain. On the bottom bar chart, you can see that the global wind energy capacity had evolved exponentially since 2008, and is split by regional consumption. In the next chart, it's going back a little bit. The source is the Global Wind Energy Council for this data. And on the demand outlook side, the wind power industry overview, we have also used the Global Wind Energy Council data and or analysis for the evolution of the capacity, because the Wind Energy Council gives only new installation growth rather than installed capacity growth. The total installed wind energy capacity is estimated to grow at 9.1% over the forecast period to reach 1,005 gigawatts from the current 650. New installations should grow at a CAGR of 4.1% from 60.4 gigawatts in 2019 to 73.4 gigawatts in 2024. This is the most optimistic case, which is discounting the COVID-19 impact on the global economy. A more pessimistic case would suppose a 2% CAGR for new installation and 5% CAGR for total installed capacity over the forecast period. The economic uncertainty coupled with phased out subsidies will contribute to further consolidation among wind turbine OEMs and farm operators. The further pressure could come from the COVID-19 pandemic, which has stalled manufacturing in China since the beginning of 2020 and spread globally afterwards. The level of economic impact is still unclear, as the situation is unfolding well into the second quarter of 2020. Okay, then continuing with the lubricant products in wind energy, the overall market. We have two bar charts. On the first bar chart, we see the total consumption globally is between 40 and 50 kilotons, and it's valued a little bit below $500 million. It's worth noting that greases have, although smaller in volume, they're higher in price compared to hydraulic fluids. And the volume of gear oil is the largest as percentage-wise. Gear oils used in offshore installations are almost entirely synthetic products. Synthetics are required due to the long drain intervals, 5 years on average in 2019. The lubricant service intervals for wind turbines using synthetic gear oils are as low as 3 years or as high as 10 years, depending on the condition of the gearbox and wind profile of the geography where the wind turbine is located. Very high drain intervals are possible mainly due to the condition monitoring. Hydraulic fluids have the lowest penetration of synthetics among all products. The use of synthetics is primarily a means to ensure long life rather than meeting severe operating conditions. The use of synthetics has picked up in emerging markets. About 80% of hydraulic oils used in China and Germany are synthetics, formulated with Group 3 or PAO or both together. Drain intervals for hydraulic fluids used in wind turbines is between 4 and 5 years currently. The use of semi-synthetics and biodegradable lubricants is small, limited to offshore wind farms. Given the risk-adverse nature of the wind turbine industry, the usage of biodegradable oils has not increased. Furthermore, gearbox leakage is not a significant issue, and if it were to happen, the leakage would be contained. Hydraulic oil is the only application where biodegradables are used, but even that at a very small extent. Okay, continuing with the key suppliers of the market. You can see on the pie chart that the leading global suppliers are the global majors, followed by the specialty supplier Kluber of greases and Fuchs. The leading suppliers are in particular global majors because they have strong relationship with wind turbine OEMs, which enables them to cater their initial fill and warranty business and post-warranty as well. And new suppliers face several entry barriers, including a rigorous approval process, a good track record as a supplier, and a performance history of new product development. Besides, the industry is risk adverse, and this results in an extension of warranties and the use of same product outside of the warranty period. Certain OEMs, such as Suzlon, do not have any agreement in place with the lubricant supplier, and will purchase lubricants for initial fill and service fill from the open market. It's worth also noting that several OEMs, bearing OEMs, have their own genuine greases which they sell, and they make quite a significant portion of the grease market. Okay, going to a deeper dive into the product categories. We'll start with gear oils at first. In terms of consumption norms, the wind turbine gearbox manufacturing is largely consolidated with large suppliers, which serve the majority of the market, and this has resulted in a few standardized designs. The gear oil consumption increases as the capacity of the wind turbine increases. It has been observed that the consumption of gear oil is around 200 liters to 300 liters of gear oils per megawatt capacity, but this trend is slowing down due to new machines with better condition monitoring. Top-ups play an important part in prolonging the lifespan of oil and machinery. Comprehensive maintenance checks are typically carried out 1 or 2 times per year, where the oil is topped up by 20 to 75 liters per year, depending on the presence of faults that cause lubricant leakage. Lubricant leakage is a common occurrence, particularly in older machines. In terms of demand, the overall demand for gear oils was at a CAGR of 12.3% from 2008 to 2019. The year 2015 marked a peak in terms of new installation, and in 2019 was a secondary peak, and you can easily observe this on the second bar, on the second chart, which is the bar chart, where you have a peak in 2015 and also a peak in 2019, significant compared to the other years. The growth rate for gear oil has lagged the overall wind capacity growth rate during the same period. This is mainly due to the extended drain intervals resulting from the use of synthetic gear oils, as well as loss of demand to direct drive turbines. Turbines based on direct drive technology do not use a central gearbox, and hence the demand for gear oil in the main gearbox is limited. Gear oil demand for the service fill market has increased as a share of the total from 2015 to 2019. This underlines the significance of the service fill market. And the first chart, you can see that China is by far the largest market of gear oils, followed by the US, Spain, India, and Germany. And Germany is behind, I would say, Spain and India. It's because they have a large share of direct drive machines. Okay, going further to the hydraulic fluids. The oil drain intervals, it's a usual practice to carry out hydraulic fluid change at the same time of gear oil change. This is a tendency to extend the drain intervals for hydraulic fluids. Drain intervals for synthetic hydraulic fluids used in wind turbines are similar to gear oils. That was the purpose of using synthetics in hydraulic fluids in wind turbines, and not mineral. It's not that the OEMs are expecting them to use synthetics. They the farm operators, they choose to do so because it's easier to change the hydraulic fluids at the same time as the gear oils. In terms of consumption norms, the quality of hydraulic fluid used in wind turbines may vary from design to design. As per rule of thumb, the quantity of hydraulic fluids used in wind turbines is approximately half of the quantity of gear oils used. The growth rate for hydraulic oil has lagged the overall wind capacity growth. In fact, the demand for hydraulic oil has fallen with 5.7% CAGR since its peak in 2015. This is mainly due to the fact that the quality of hydraulic oil has improved significantly due to the increasing penetration of synthetic oils. The share of the service fill market has decreased from 2015 to 2019, underlying the growing importance of new installation with increased drain intervals. Yes, here we can see the peak in 2015 and then a small decline. Even though the number of installations is increasing, the volume is slightly decreasing because of the prolonged drain interval. And also, it's worth noting that the US is the primary market for hydraulic oils, it's not China. And this is because China is using more synthetic hydraulic oils than the US. China was the #1 hydraulic oil market for wind turbines in 2015, but this has changed. On the grease side, unlike gear oils, grease has to be replenished continuously. Most of the wind turbines come with a central greasing system to which a certain quantity of grease is filled every year. Grease from the system is automatically applied to the relevant parts of the wind turbine. Generator bearings have auto lubrication systems because more frequent lubrication is required due to their higher speed. Auto lubers tend to use more grease than manual greasing. For turbines, having auto lubers, top-up of grease is done in minor volumes whenever necessary, usually every 6 months. In terms of consumption norms, the requirement for grease increases with machine size, as the quantity of grease used is correlated to the diameter of the bearings. The major portion of demand for grease comes from rotor shaft bearing and blade bearings. Additionally, some minor demand comes from generator bearings and yaw bearings. But these are very specialized greases, actually, the generator bearings particularly. The share of the initial fill market has increased from 2015 to 2019, underlying the growing importance of the installed base. Here, you can see that China is the top market of grease, even though it should be smaller in theory, but they have different consumption norms compared to the European OEMs. So they use a lot more grease, and they have poor quality compared to the European grease providers. Also here, you can see a bump in demand with the peak in 2015. As China starts to improve the grease quality, the volume comes down globally. Okay. Moving further on the demand outlook side, the total installed wind energy capacity is estimated to grow at the CAGR of 9.1% over the forecast period to reach 1,000 gigawatts. This analysis is based on new installation published in the Global Wind Energy Outlook Spring 2020. New installations should grow at the CAGR of 4.1% from 60.4 gigawatts in 2019 to 73.4 gigawatts in 2024. The demand for gear oil is set to become increasingly correlated with new installations since drain intervals are increasing. Additionally, there is increasing penetration of direct drive wind turbines in emerging markets, particularly China. Greece is the bright spot. In volume terms, Greece is expected to grow at a fast pace until 2024, fueled by new installations and higher consumption. Direct drive machines use grease but do not use gear oil. Hydraulic fluid will continue to decline as synthetic formulations will continue to replace mineral formulations in order to match the extended drain intervals of gear oils. Hydraulic oils will see a negative CAGR in the volume terms. In volume terms, both hydraulic and gear oils are set to increase. Okay, and in terms of market evaluations, Klein has a predictive model based on historical and current economic environment, also based on the current installed capacity forecast. We have an optimistic scenario, which is mostly based on the Global Wind Energy Council forecast from spring 2020. Then we have a most likely scenario and a pessimistic scenario, which is the bottom line, the bottom bright line here. Almost all scenarios suppose a downfall, a slump in consumption for lubricants used in wind energy by 2021, followed by a sharp V recovery over the next few years. The wind energy industry has experienced exponential growth over the last 20 years. The strong growth has not gone unnoticed, and new market entrants are trying to get in, especially in the emerging markets. Despite the growth, there are several concerns about the industry in the minds of lubricant marketers. Industry growth in the current economic climate. Secondly, the effect of direct drive machines and drain interval extension on lubricant consumption. And thirdly is the fading subsidies and the transition to a new model. In terms of summary, the last conclusions and highlights of which I'm going to share with you. Wind turbines do not use any natural resource and provide carbon-free energy. With increased awareness and acceptance of global warming, governments around the world are promoting wind energy in their energy mix. In Asia, more current than global warming is the need to address deteriorating air quality due to pollution from coal-fired thermal power plants. Both China and India have seen rapid growth in wind energy in the last 15 years. Over the next 5 years, China will account for nearly 40% of all new wind turbine capacity. Some countries, such as Germany, plan to phase out nuclear power following the accident in Japan in 2011. Wind energy will have a big role to play as the replacement energy source in Germany. Especially Germany is the home of a lot of OEMs in the wind energy industry. You have Siemens there, you have Nordex, you have Enercon, so they could all receive some sort of support from the government. The year 2015 was the peak in terms of new installation, and 2019 was the second peak. This came as both China and the US showed a strong performance. The wind energy business is a high margin business for lubricant marketers. The share of synthetics in the overall demand exceeds any other end-use industry. The cost of lubricants is not significant in the overall maintenance cost, and sales are driven more by product performance, guarantees, and track record. Thus, there is a minimal downward pressure on product prices. The COVID-19 epidemic is expected to stall much of the activity and perhaps postpone some of the scheduled projects. In terms of a potential economic stimulus, the wind energy sector might not be not on most governments' agenda, since this sector employs rather few people. Okay, and the last slides, we're expecting questions.
Yes, Gabriel. There are actually quite a lot of questions, but there's one that's fairly.
I saw the pop-up.
Yeah, fairly general, and I think we could start with that one because there's a lot of particular questions about grease. But I guess this one that you mentioned, that the wind turbine industry is risk averse. Can you explain in more detail why is that?
Well, it depends what you understand by risk adverse, but in our view, it's a lot of the countries they've been trying to clean their air. They've been trying to find some sort of alternative to fossil fuels. So they've been investing so far in the last 20 years. There's no guarantee they will continue to do so, but as far as we see that a V-shaped, as I mentioned, as I showed here, we forecast a V-shaped recovery, even though there's the current economic downfall will surely impact the industry as such, but then there will be a sharp recovery as more governments will stimulate the clean energy.
Yes, I think you mentioned that even like some countries like Germany, right, and China, they particularly care about,
Yes.
you know,
Germany is a key country because of the OEMs. They're home to a lot of strong global OEMs, which are very strong in this area.
Okay. So because many questions about the grease, and I'll just pass over like a few, and they're pretty, I don't know if you're gonna have like the answer right away, but pretty, you know, precise. So what type of greases are used in wind turbines? For example, mineral, synthetic, you know, poly, I can't even say that, polyurethane type. You can say it better than me. Is it something you can address right now?
Well, there's all sorts of greases. All the ones which you mentioned are used because you have Kluber there. I mean, that says everything. Like if you have Kluber, one of the major suppliers globally, they're the grease specialists. So, and you can clearly see that there is some specialty niche greases which are being used, especially in generator and yawn. But there is also some broader spectrum greases used in the bearings, in the main rotor bearing, which are not that specialized. So I guess it depends on the OEM, and it really depends whether it's in China or outside of China. In China, they have different consumption norms compared to the rest of the world because they have different OEMs. I mean, they have their own OEMs. They have also the global OEMs which have a presence there, but over the past 5 years, their own OEMs have been gaining market. So they have different consumption norms and they use different types of greases.
It makes sense. This is actually a pretty related question. A question to this is whether Ecolabel greases are used in European offshore turbines or like in offshore turbines.
Yeah, actually the custom greases are mostly used in the offshore segment.
The custom,
so custom greases because of some of them are, some of them aren't. I think Nordex is one of the one of the OEMs that uses them. I would say they're not really focused on the Ecolabel as much as on the properties. They need to deal with the hurricanes. They need to deal with the fog, the saltiness of the water. So they need a lot of different properties which the onshore greases do not.
Okay, I see. Another interesting.
There's some biodegradable ones used. I'm not sure whether they're Ecolabel or not. Probably if you say Nordex, Northern Germany, yeah, there's some. I'm certain there's some used, but it's not a major market for them.
Okay.
It's more that the OEMs and the farm operators are focused on the severe conditions of those areas. But this has not been covered in such broad, because even within wind turbines, you have this niche. So if you get that 4% of the lubricant consumption comes from offshore, so we have that focused in a separate chapter in the report. So we try to cover as much as possible, but it's still in the early innings, I would say. It's exploding. the offshore installations are just exploding everywhere across the world because the efficiency of offshore installations is much higher than the onshore ones, and you don't have the problem with the space and with the noise and with the, I would say, radar and commercial aviations. So it has better growth than the onshore installations. But we haven't really focused in depth into offshore, what's offshore about and what type of products they use. We know that they use some, we don't know exactly how much, we just know that it's small.
So there's actually a very related question to that. Sorry to interrupt you, but there's also I guess it's more of an opinion than a fact question, is that why are so little biodegradable loops used despite the spillages? I guess this is more like an environmental question.
Yeah, he's right. He or she, they're right. They should be using, especially in the offshore segment, they should be using more. I guess the largest application is still hydraulics, it's not grease. And well, on the gear oil side, in all fairness, the likelihood of them spilling is not very large, but for hydraulic and grease, yeah, there is a likelihood of spillage. So there is some hydraulic use, that's the largest, and then say biogreases. But the problem with that is that there's not enough. So if you use biodegradable grease, then you need to use a lot more because it doesn't have the drain interval. So it doesn't have the durability of the, let's say, the polyurea one and the synthetic ones.
Another that's pretty general question about if solar energy posing any threat to wind energy. I guess that's something that we do not cover in the research exactly, but
well, it's a fairly easy to analyze. It's very easy to see. So you need to have both. You cannot have one or the other. Why? Because when the wind doesn't blow, the sun is shining, you know. So it's quite easy to answer that question. But I would say that the offshore wind energy is the game changer, because in the offshore climate you have wind blowing almost always.
Right. I see some questions. Sorry, so questions that people, I think they missed at the beginning of the presentation that you talked about the countries that we cover. And in fact, that this is a global report, but we covered 5 key countries, right?
Yes.
And
it's because these 5 countries, they encompass 75% of the consumption. So we would waste our time trying to, I don't know, to analyze Chile or Taiwan or, you know, some really tiny, well, which are growing. These markets, like you have Chile, you have Brazil, you have Taiwan.
There's some country, like people asking about Middle East, or somebody's asking about Middle East and North America, which countries?
Yeah, I think, no, we don't cover those, but it's a growing segment. It's still in the beginning, but it's not worth covering yet.
But we do cover China, right, in detail?
Yes, of course. Yeah,
that's another question.
Largest.
Yeah. There is many questions, like 20 questions. We've addressed quite a few. I don't know. It's over. You know, we kind of planned it to be over in a little bit over 30 minutes, half an hour. Do you have a few more minutes? Maybe you can address a few more, or
sure.
Just pass
Let's
it?
Go ahead.
Actually, they pretty much related. If you have OEM market share split and the regional positions, if you cover that.
Yeah, we do cover it. I think in the individual report, and also partly in the report as overall, but mostly it's split on the OEM sales of new machines. But this data is available by the Global Wind Energy Council and the associations, in individual country associations. I mean, this is not something, it's public data. So we use the public data in order to calculate our lubricant, to plug it into our lubricant model, and then you get the estimates and you get the consumption.
Okay, and how, if it's a new company, this is something I think I saw in the report. If it's a new company, how long does it plus minus take to get the product approved, which is not a big multinational company?
Well, I think that what they look at, so OEMs, what they look at firstly is they look at the supplier to be able to cater as many markets as possible. So the one problem that like any other industrial application, so the OEMs, they need to think to have consistency. So to have consistent performance across the board. So if they sell a turbine in Japan, or they sell a turbine in the Middle East, or they sell a turbine in South America, they need to have consistency. So when they think of tying these global deals, they want to make sure that the company can sell to them everywhere. So to have the same kind of lubes, so to have a consistent performance. And yeah, it's possible to gain access. It will take, I think, how much the design of a new turbine takes about 4 years. Then you have the testing. So in about 5 years, 5 to 6 years, you can probably get the product out of the market.
Okay. Well, thank you, Gabriel. there's more and more, a lot more questions. That how about I'll just send it over to you, and perhaps we can address the rest. Is like like very specific questions about drain intervals and so
sure.
on. So I guess we can, you can address them via email. Is that something we can do, right?
Yeah, why not? And also, in all fairness, I mean, there are some companies in the US like Amsoil, which has no warranty, or has some warranty business actually, but small, and they use the ISPs. So that's the third party. That's the farms. They push their product to the farm operators, and they have had success. But mostly that's with the old park. And yeah, what I've seen that the OEMs, at least in Europe, they try to fight to extend the warranty, to eat up as much as possible of the maintenance business, because that's a big cash cow for them, especially now that the market is consolidating globally. So they're trying to get as much as possible of the maintenance market, leaving less for the ISPs, for the independent service operators.